Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And today we are so excited to be joined by friend of the show, Joey. Welcome, Joey.
Hello.
We always love having you here. We almost got to meet you in our hometown.
Yeah. There was a tease.
Sometime, yeah. That was, oh my God. I'll give you all the rundown of that off mic later.
Okay.
Had to do with some of the chaos of earlier this month. But yeah, happy to be on as always.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. And this is a fun one because this is a very special Feminist Movie Friday. And this was a movie that you suggested a while back. And I was like, yeah, I think we should talk about that. I'm very excited to talk about it. Samantha and I had never seen it. It is very recent. So yes, if you haven't seen it, spoilers, going to be spoiled throughout. But yes, Joey, can you tell us what film are we talking about today?
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about the 2023 movie Bottoms, directed by Emma Seligman, and starring Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri, known, from The Bear and all of that. This is one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie, and I'm so excited to be talking to you guys about this. Before we started recording, I know, Samantha, you said this was not what you expected it was going to be. I definitely, when I pitched it to you, I was sort of like, you know what? I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm going to let them watch it and see what their reactions are.
Like, I've seen previews, so I was prepared for some of it. And then I was like, no, okay, that turned very quickly. Like, got a level of like, well, that was something different. Okay.
I think the only thing I knew about it was, Joey, you explained it in a way that was like, I liked that gay people were not all good people in it. And that's why I was
see, this is my main thing with the movie is I'm like, and we're going to get more into this, but it is a high school movie about where all the characters are queer. It's not necessarily about coming out or about like how hard it is to be gay or whatever. It's just a movie where the characters are queer. And like a lot of my high school movies, like a lot of rom-coms, they let the characters be very messy and very awful at points. And that was very refreshing, which I'm going to get into. I think this, I personally found it very refreshing to have a movie where like we had these like very messy queer characters that were front and center, very messy female and also like, younger queer characters, especially. Quick content warning. So this just all kind of talking within the context of this movie and how this movie deals with stuff. We talk a little bit about school shootings and school violence and also sexual assault and those conversations. So make sure you're taking care while listening. So to introduce this movie a little bit, I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to backtrack to a completely different movie that came out 6 years ago. and because again, like I talked about, I think it's important to, when we're talking about this movie, to sort of talk about the whole idea of like, quote unquote, queer high school movies, which is like a newer trend in cinema, but like what has happened with those kind of stories. So backtracking to spring 2018, I was at the end of my first year of college. I was sat in a movie theater in the East Village in Manhattan to watch a movie that had just come out called Love, Simon, which was a film that got a lot of hype for being really the first like big budget high school rom-com that was produced by a major studio that had like a gay main character. So the movie ended. Lights went up. I was there with a friend of mine who was also queer. I turned to that friend. She was in tears. A lot of people around us were in tears. We're very emotional. And I am a liar. So I was sort of like, yeah, that was great. I loved that. I'm crying right now. I didn't really like the movie.
Please tell me you said, I'm crying.
I think that literally was what I said, yeah. I'm sick. But and so I'm not saying this to try to yuck anybody's yum. I do think like art is very subjective and movies are very subjective and storytelling, that's all very subjective. Everybody has their own emotional reactions to things. But I remember leaving that movie in 2018. Like I had kind of just experienced being, I feel weird saying like openly gay because I feel like it was more of a like people that knew, kind of like people that needed to know, or if anybody asked, I would be honest about it. But like more or less openly queer in high school. It just like was not a movie that reflected my experience. And I think like later on, I saw a lot of criticism where people were sort of saying the same thing. And again, I do understand. I think there is a place for those kind of stories. That being said, the movie Love, Simon very much was sort of a like, the point of the movie was really much like, hey, look, straight people, we're just like you. We're normal and popular and you know, gender conforming and live in our upper middle class, white suburban cookie cutter town and just want to be like you and everything's great. And oh, we're just also gay. It's very much like respectability politics. And again, like I think if this is the kind of movie you watch and you felt seen by that, that's great. And I love that. And I think that's important. And I also think there is a place for like these kind of stories, especially like that are marketed towards kids. And I think that is important. But again, that was a movie that I left. I just remember being like, is this what we're getting now? Like, is this what queer cinema is going to be? Is it going to be like so rooted in trying to appease straight people or like to show them that we're normal and we're just like them? And like, it's going to be very like sugar-coated kind of stories. Flash forward now to last August. The night before, my best friend Hannah and I had gone out to Henrietta Hudson, which is a lesbian bar in Manhattan. Got to give them a shout out. Had a great time. Was a little hungover the next day. Was satted in a Sunday matinee to go see Bottoms at a nearby indie theater. There was a setup in the lobby. This theater does like themed kind of setups based on movies that are coming out sometimes. So like they had a setup for Bottoms that was like modeled after one of the classrooms. It was really fun. We got a lot of fun pictures. The movie started, and then after a 1 hour and 32 minutes fever dream of laughing and cheering, the lights lifted, and I felt like I finally had the experience that like the people around me were experiencing when I went to go see Love, Simon that I was pretending to have. Because to me, Bottoms is the loud, irreverent, annoying gay response to the trend of movies like Love, Simon that like very heavily pander to this respectable, straight, liberal gaze. It is a movie that it reminded me a lot of Booksmart, where it's which is Olivia Wilde's debut film, in which that like it really speaks to much like breaking down a lot of these high school movie tropes. And it's like I kind of saw it as like this is a high school movie for people that were miserable in high school. So yeah, like I said, I think one of the strengths of the movies is in reverting a lot of these typical tropes associated with high school rom-coms. It follows the tradition of other like earlier queer movies like But I'm a Cheerleader, and using these very like over the top, very gendered aesthetics to poke fun of the strict expectations of heteronormative, you know, suburban America. And I found this quote from a review in RogerEbert.com from Monica Castillo that writes, Bottoms dropkicks John Hughes movies on their ass and lets the girls take charge, not just as pouty wallflowers or broody misfits until someone gives them a makeover. They're weirdos, they're the nerds, they have every right to fail, be crass, make crude jokes, and shed blood. Seligman and Sennett are all in on the joke, right down to the end credits blooper reel. And so again, like I said, despite kind of the like really campy over the top, like satirical tone of this movie, I felt like it did a better job of reflecting the way that I felt as a high schooler and also like the kind of story that I wanted to see compared to like a lot more recent queer high school centric media like Love, Simon or Heartstopper or... Which, again, if these are movies that you like, I have a lot of friends that are really into Heartstopper. Personally, it doesn't do it for me, but, like, you know, everybody's got their own tastes. Or, like, you know, a lot of the other stuff that we're seeing is, like, queer dramas that are usually about, like, conversion camps or something really depressing. Like, this was very, like... And the thing that I really liked about the movie, which the director Emma Selkman has spoken about is the fact that it's like she wanted to make this movie where the characters just happen to be queer. That's not like the plot isn't like, oh my God, this is a drama about coming out or about your parents sending you to a conversion camp or some other awful kind of traumatic experience. It's just about being a high schooler and navigating like dating and having crushes and all of these things as a high schooler. And yeah, the thing that I like is that the characters are messy. Like that to me is so much more interesting than like, again, like God love Simon a lot, but like the main character of that movie is so boring. Like I could not tell you a personality trait he had, but like, I don't know. And like, I don't know about you guys, but like I was a mess in high school. Like I was a complete idiot. Like I'm like, this is probably, again, this is why I say I'm like, this is probably more reflective of who I was and the stories I would have wanted to see. And you guys just did an episode about 10 Things I Hate About You, which I think is interesting because that also just happens to be one of my favorite movies. And I think one of the things that I really love about that movie is the fact that all of the characters are kind of awful. Like it is the same thing where it's like, you know, the people tend to like comedies because the characters are messed up, not because the characters are perfect. Like those are the things that we enjoy and we are drawn to and we relate to. And I think as gay people, we also deserve to have those kind of characters. So yeah, now getting to the plot of the movie. So like I said, this movie was co-created by writer-director Emma Selkman and actor Rachel Sennett. The pair had previously worked on Shiva Baby, which I still have not seen, but I really want to see, which was an underground hit kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. It was based on a project that the pair had started working on while they were students at NYU. They actually also went to NYU with Ayo Edebiri, who is the other star of this film, known for her roles in The Bear. She's actually been doing a lot lately. She's great. Right. I love her. I'm obsessed with her.
Let's see. And then Rachel Sennett is from Bodies.
She's also in Bodies.
I figured out last night.
Yes.
The podcaster. I was like, oh.
Yes. But anyway, keep going. She was great.
I actually still haven't seen Bodies either. Okay, that's also been on my list.
Really?
I have a lot I gotta.
You haven't seen that? You love this movie, but you haven't seen that movie?
I know.
Oh no, you need to see that movie.
Oh my God, it's like on Netflix or something now too. So I've been meaning to sit down and
you need to see that movie.
I know. So, according to a Deadline article about this movie, the duo, quote, came up with the idea for the raunchy teen comedy on a whiteboard, putting down everything we wanted to see in a movie on the board, from, quote, punching to vagina to knitting, said Sennett, which I think is a great way to start working on a movie. But yeah, so Bottoms is the story of two best friends, PJ, who's played by Rachel Sennett, and Josie, who's played by Ayo Edebiri, who hatch a plan to start a, quote, self-defense club to get girls to want to sleep with them. In typical buddy comedy fashion, PJ is this like very brash, confident character who's often pulling Josie along into like her crazy schemes. And Josie is the much more reserved, anxious, more or less the rational one at the start of the movie, at least. So the movie primarily serves to satirize the dramatics of often very straight high school movies. And given that a lot of these movies revolve around like a big upcoming football game with their high school's rival team, this is something that the movie also does. So this whole movie, there's this like ongoing plot in the background that there's this big upcoming game with the rival school, Huntington. The school that they go to is called Rockbridge High School, which I didn't realize until I was writing this plot. But yeah, so the big rival school is called Huntington. And so there's all these things about like, oh my God, we're going up against Huntington. The movie also, again, given that they're like starting this like quote unquote self-defense club that turns into like a fight club, it pulls a lot from David Fincher's 1999 film Fight Club, which I will say is also one of my favorite movies. And one day I will write an episode defending why I love that movie. But I know it is like controversial. Anyway, so this movie begins at a carnival. Again, a very typical high school movie trope, where Josie and PJ awkwardly try to flirt with their respective crushes. Isabel, who's played by Havana Rose Liu, and Brittany, who's played by Kaya Gerber. Isabel and Brittany are both like popular, beautiful cheerleaders. And Isabel is dating the star of their high school's football team, Jeff, played by Nicholas Galitzine. I just realized I do not know how to say his last name, but of Red, White, and Royal Blue and that Anne Hathaway, Harry Styles movie that just came out, fame. So after failing to woo their crushes, Josie and PJ walk away dejected. Josie goes on this like unhinged, beautiful monologue about how she's never going to get a girlfriend and she's going to have to get married to like this gay guy at their school and they're going to become super religious. And apparently Io improvised that. She's brilliant. I'm obsessed with her. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie. So as they're leaving, they witness Isabel storming away from a pleading Jeff, who apparently she caught flirting with one of the moms in their town. So PJ is kind of like egging Josie on, like, oh, you should go talk to her. And Josie offers Isabel a safety ride. They're in Josie's car. Isabel walks in. Jeff stands in front of the car and is like, I'm not leaving until Isabel comes out. Isabel and PJ are really like egging Josie on. Josie slightly moves the car forward and like taps Jeff's knee. And of course, he like falls over dramatically. This kind of leads us to the introduction of like the rest of the football team, particularly this character, Tim, who is Jeff's right-hand man, and at least appears to have like at least one-sided homoerotic relationship with Jeff. Again, really leading into like making fun of a lot of these like character tropes of high school movies. So they all rush to Jeff's aid and the girls drive away in a panic. So the next day we are at Rockbridge High School and we really get to see that like these girls are like losers. There's the double meaning of the film. They are at the bottom of the social structure or whatever. There's some graffiti with some choice words on their lockers. And then we learn two big things. So they walk to their history class that day, and we find out that the story of Josie lightly tapping Jeff's knee and him falling over has kind of been exaggerated into they like beat up Jeff. And then so also there's this other character named Hazel that's sort of like a third wheel friend with Josie and PJ. And there had been a misunderstanding while they were at the carnival. PJ makes kind of a sarcastic joke about them being at juvie. Hazel thinks it's serious and tells the whole school that these girls had gone to juvie the whole summer. Hazel's played by Ruby Cruz, who she was in like Willow. I never watched it. I don't know, Anney, if it seems like that's your kind of thing.
You clocked it.
But I think she also plays a queer character in that, which I was like, that's really cool. She's great. I'm excited to see her in more things. So everybody, like the whole school's kind of got this new like reverent like weariness of the pair, and Jeff walks in and he's got this like full leg cast on and he's like threatening them. And then so we also hear over the announcements over the school's intercom, there's an announcement warning girls about an influx of violent incidents carried out by the school's rival football team, Huntington. Leading up to this big football game, there's a girl, an anonymous victim of this violence, who tells them about how she was walking home from the carnival by herself and she got punched in the face. And then this is followed out by an announcement calling for the, quote, ugly, untalented gays to report to the principal's office. That being PJ and Josie. They go there. The school's principal berates them for committing a crime against Jeff, our quarterback and the most good-looking, all-American, red-blooded, muscular man this town has ever seen. And so, desperate to not get expelled, and inspired by the earlier announcement about the influx of violent attacks on girls at their school, Josie makes up an excuse that the incident was simply a misunderstanding and that they were practicing for their self-defense club. This gets them off the hook, and while Josie is ready to just move on and forget the incident, PJ latches onto this idea that they should start an all-girls fight club. And this is what will get girls to fall in love with them, particularly Isabel and Brittany. Another one of my favorite scenes of this movie involves PJ, Josie, and Hazel sitting on the bleachers concocting this idea. Hazel, again, kind of being, you know, the straight man character of this whole thing, is straight man in like a comedy sense, and there's nothing heterosexual about Hazel. She argues that this is going to be like a great idea because, quote, this school has a serious lack of female solidarity and it'll be empowering. Josie doesn't want to do it. PJ is like, this is going to get girls' attention. It's going to be great. There's another line from the scene that I really love, and I think kind of gets at that whole thing I was talking about before about like, I think I really love that this movie lets queer characters be awful and like kind of be awful in a way that like straight characters and particularly straight male characters are often allowed to be in these sort of movies. Josie says about this whole idea, we can't do this. We'd be misleading them. And PJ responds, guys do that all the time. That's the point of feminism. To which Josie responds, that's not the point of feminism. Also, you don't care about feminism. Your favorite show is Entourage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which again, yeah, going back to 10 Things I Hate About You, like the whole kind of premise of the movie is a similar sort of thing, like misleading the women in the story. Is it something that like people should do? Is it something that's being encouraged? No, but it's a fun trope. It's a fun way to start the plot. And I love that this film like allows that story to be queer. So the girls proceed to start this club. They find a sponsor in their detached history teacher, Mr. G, who's played by Marshawn Lynch, who I did not know was a football player when I saw this movie, but apparently he's a football player. He was great. Who we learn is going through a divorce, and he agrees to help the pair because my mom says I need a hobby. They then proceed to start the club. PJ steals Hazel's line about it being about female solidarity and empowerment and kind of uses that to like try to get girls to get involved. They get to the first meeting and PJ is audibly disappointed that all these girls are ugly that showed up. And then again proceeds to go on a very like Tyler Durden-esque monologue about the rules of the club and how they got to show up on time and just being very like tough guy. And then Brittany and Isabel walk in and totally change his tone. So then there's this like great montage where we see like the club really taking off and we get to kind of learn a little bit more about like the individual girls that are in this club. They're all very like high school trope kind of characters. It's fun. There's one who's kind of like the stoner, like skater girl character. There's this one character, Stella Rebecca, who's kind of like the hot girl of the school. She's one of the cheerleaders too. There's another girl who's like very Christian. There's a montage of all the girls fighting each other. By the way, Charlie XCX co-wrote the score, which is part of why it is so amazing. We see over this montage, Josie really gaining confidence. And we also see the duo kind of rising in their like social rank of this high school. We see Mr. G starting to talk about feminism in his history class. Still sort of in the satirical tone of the movie. There's a shot of him writing on the whiteboard, feminism, who started it? Question mark. A, Gloria Steinem. B, a man. C, another woman. Which I gotta say, as somebody who went to like an American public high school, that is not far off from like how they taught us about like the women's liberation movement. Like I was like, wait, that like literally it's like, who is Gloria Steinem? Okay, that's enough feminism for today. So this also is where we start to get some conflict as the club is gaining its prominence. And we see Tim, who again is Jeff's right-hand man, noticing the club kind of gaining more attention. He corners PJ and Josie and kind of politely threatens them to not take attention away from the big game. Josie points out this is kind of impossible. There's like pictures of Jeff everywhere. And then also we learn through Hazel's point of view as she goes home from school one day that her mom, who she earlier had mentioned is going through this whole like post-divorce midlife crisis, has been hooking up with Jeff. Quick note, Jeff is wearing his football uniform. This is the whole like gendered aesthetic. He's wearing his football uniform for the entire movie. And like when we see him in the scene, he like runs out and he's still got his shoulder pads on, which again, the costuming is so good. The next day, Hazel tells Josie and PJ what she saw. Josie proceeds to tell Isabel. And in another really beautiful sequence, we get to see Isabel on a warpath as she confronts Jeff in their high school cafeteria. Jeff and the football team are seated in front of a rendition of The Creation of Adam, but with Jeff's face on it.
And a football in hand, I must say.
And a football in hand, yes. The set design, the costumes, everything on this movie, so good. The rest of the Fight Club rallies behind her. They're really like a unit now. They're going to plan their revenge. Hazel, once again, doesn't have the best concept of like scale and tone and all of that. Suggests they should build a bomb. Which PJ says, no, we're not going to do that. But the next night, they're at Jeff's house, all donning masks, and they're egging his house. Isabel and Josie are kind of having an intimate moment in the car, alone. It's clear that Isabel maybe has some feelings for Josie as well. The pair are about to kiss, and they're interrupted by Hazel blowing up Jeff's car. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get a little bit more into this later when we discuss kind of the whole movie, but something that I really like about the movie is sort of the whole way that it, which we'll talk about more at the end too, the whole like theme of like violence and how violence is discussed in the movie is something that really stood out to me. I think especially as somebody who like grew up and was in school during like the peak of like school violence and gun violence and all of this like being in the news. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. Like I went to a high school where there was a couple of school shooting scares and threats and stuff like that. And I think just later on kind of dealing with the sort of processing some of what I had experienced in high school as an adult. I think there was sort of a thread of that in this movie that I think I really appreciated. So anyways, yeah, Hazel blows up the car. They all drive away in the panic. The next day, the club's meeting again. They're all kind of like, oh, well, you know, it was nice while it lasted, but the club's over now. You know, the real fight club was the friends we made along the way. At this point, we see Josie now fully committed to the whole grift. She stands up and tells this really dramatic story about being in juvie, and which again, they never went to juvie. That's the whole lie here. The romantic tension between her and Isabel grows. Everybody really seems ready to just kind of move on. PJ, on the other hand, is not. She really is arguing for them to keep the club going. Hazel kind of responds something to the extent of like, hey, sorry, PJ, you didn't get what you wanted from this club, but the rest of us we got that and we're ready to move on. They get into an argument. Hazel points out the fact that she basically ran this club for them. PJ calls Hazel a loser with no friends and a skank for a mom. Hazel runs off crying. We see a conniving Tim watching this whole interaction go off and follow Hazel. Then we cut to a scene between Josie and Isabel, who has come over to Josie's house to work on a homework assignment. There's some awkward flirting between the two. We get a little bit more of a backstory into Josie and PJ's friendship. They're childhood best friends who grew up with the same babysitter, an older lesbian named Rhodes, who PJ calls their gay Yoda. The pair finally kiss. And then we cut to Brittany's bedroom, where PJ, in sort of a parallel scene, PJ is over to help with a homework assignment. There's some awkward flirting, except when PJ leans in to kiss Brittany, she informs her that she's straight. So the next day, there's a big pep rally, and we see Josie slide into the bleachers next to PJ, excited to tell her about the night with Isabel. But before they can really talk, the pep rally starts. There's a brief performance by the cheerleading squad, which just entails them dumping a bottle of water on Stella Rebecca, who's that like hot girl cheerleader character who's part of the Fight Club. Tim runs out, announces that, you know, before the festivities start, they're going to have a demonstration from this Fight Club that they've been hearing about. That's been the big thing that everybody's been talking about. So they break out Hazel, who they announce is one of the founders of the club, who's going to fight the school's top boxer, Tucker, who is this massive dude they bring out in a cage. Also, I didn't realize this till like the second time I watched the movie, but he's in the background of a bunch of shots in a cage. Like there's just a dude in a cage and a bunch of the background shots in the movies. And then you realize, oh, it's the boxer guy that they're going to bring out. Hazel is sort of like, wait. I thought I was going to fight PJ. What's going on? Hazel gets her handed to her. Tim gets his big villain speech moment where he's like, I know what you're wondering. How could a girl under the tutelage of two juvie-trained killers can't even stand up for herself against a regular old dude? The regular old dude, of course, being this like giant guy. But again, like perfect satirical, like laying out a very misogynistic, like gotcha point of like, oh, but like, shouldn't you be able to fight up like, come on, are you kidding me?
She held her own for a minute, I will say.
She held her own for a minute.
She did. Like, wow, she did. Okay, maybe she will win this. And then she didn't.
She did.
And of course, so then he reveals they did not go to juvie and they did not start this club to empower women, but to cheerleaders. And then he gets to the line, what is wrong with you? It is such a shame. We were really rooting for you girls. Which again, I think just going back to the whole like satirical tone of this movie, like I think like watching this as a queer person where it's like the minute you particularly as like a woman or an AFAB queer person, I think express the fact that you have sexual desire or that you whatever, like that is stigmatized so much. And I think when we talk about like there is a level of like I think my criticism of a lot of these other kind of queer movies that have been very sanitized and very much for a straight audience, like there's a reason they're very bland and like sexless and whatever. And again, like not every movie has to have like this level of, you know, whatever. But like I think there is a level to which like a straight audience is willing to accept like queer characters that do not express sexual desire, that do not express, you know, the fact that they too are feeling these same feelings that straight people have. So yeah, PJ and Josie are ostracized by the group. Isabel confronts Josie and breaks it off with her for lying to her. There's a great line from one of the club members who's the like really Christian one who says, "I thought this club was about sisterhood, but it's all about your own self-interest. This is a second wave all over again."
Yeah, that was a great line.
I love that line.
That was a great line.
So the rest of the group rally around Hazel. They leave PJ and Josie alone to be confronted by a betrayed Mr. G who says, "I trusted you two. Y'all exploited my solidarity. I played the role of an amazing ally," which I get. Okay, I've had that conversation with like male feminists before so many times. Like I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm having deja vu to like the minute I do so, I like slightly criticize something that you did or said or whatever. Like, what do you mean? I'm an amazing ally. Like, I don't know. I love that line.
I feel like that's a white feminist characteristic that
exactly.
we hear about often.
I love when he crosses through feminism on his chalkboard. That's such a good scene.
It's such a good scene. So yeah, then there's this PJ and Josie get in a fight over whose fault it was. There's this traumatic montage to Avril Lavigne's Complicated. Music choice is perfect. Hysterical. We see Mr. G crossing out feminism. The graffiti on their lockers has been replaced by horny freak number 1 and horny freak number 2. And this montage ends with Josie going to see Rhodes, their gay Yoda, to ask for advice about how to fix the duo's friendship. Rhodes doesn't really give her... Okay, so Rhodes, by the way, is played by Punky Johnson of SNL. Fantastic. She doesn't really give her much advice. It's very much kind of like the just whimsical whatever. But then she does tell her about this big football game with Huntington that's coming up. Rhodes reveals that every year that this happens, so like every 20 years, there's this big game. The Huntington football team kills a member of the Rockbridge Falls High School football team. So Josie realizes that they're going to kill Jeff and runs to find PJ so that they can save the day. We're now on the last scene of the film, which is the part that the last 20 minutes are like an insane fever dream. I'm going to do the best I can to run through everything that happens.
This is where I said, wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
Wait.
I have made so many people sit down and watch this movie, and every time it's like, oh, this is great. Oh, wait, what? Like, so PJ and Josie race to the football game where they find the rest of the club and plead for their help to stop the game, pointing out that there's nobody from Huntington on the other side, which feels like a red flag that something is about to go wrong. PJ offers a half-hearted apology to Hazel, who accepts. PJ tells her they need a distraction, and this time, Hazel gets to build her bomb. But it does not go off. So the girls proceed to Distraction Plan 2. Which is, of course, yelling at the cheerleaders to make out. Understandable next step. They don't. Isabel and Brittany are so mad at them. So Hazel and PJ start to make out. Which, again, another great scene because it leads to a couple of notable reactions. Sally Rebecca sees them and goes, wait, I'm gay. Brittany says, I'm not. I just like gay porn. And Jeff says, this is nothing like porn. Wait, is porn even real? While this is going on, Josie is off trying to figure out what's going on, realizes that Huntington has brought a bunch of pineapple juice, which earlier in the film it is established that Jeff is deathly allergic to. By the way, as a fellow deathly, I have a severe allergy to nuts, and I was like, love the representation.
Good to note. I didn't know this about you.
The scene where like Tim like knocks the pineapple out of the way. I was watching this with like my roommates, and they were all like, literally like the day before there was something where like we were getting some food and there was something with nuts, and they were like, "No, Joey!" And I was like, "That's you guys." I don't even see it. You were like, "No." Like I can look at it. It's fine. I just can't eat it.
Nope.
But anyways, yeah. So they realize there must be pineapple juice somewhere in the field that they're going to use to kill Jeff. This accumulates in a big fight scene between the Fight Club, Isabel and Brittany now having joined in to help. They basically kill the whole Huntington football team, at first kind of by accident, and then just, they end with all the players dead on the field. Through this whole thing, Josie heroically saves Jeff by like carrying him across the field just in time before the sprinklers go off. Once the rest of the crowd realizes that the girls saved Jeff's life, they all cheer. Everybody clapped. Isabel and Josie are reunited. Josie apologizes. Isabel tells her, you didn't have to start a whole fight club just to date me. You could have just like talked to me. They kiss. The music swells. We've reached the end of the film. The camera pans out, and then the bomb goes off behind the tree. And we've reached the end.
I do like that at one point in which Josie was like, when she says you don't have to do this, Fight Club, she's like, well, we'll talk about how real that really is. Like she's actually trying to be like, no, that's not. I did try to talk to you. That didn't work. Remember? Like that's the reality. That's
in
not
defense, they did terribly.
They did terribly
in the beginning when they were trying to talk to them. To their crushes, respective crushes. It was real bad.
It was funny.
Oh my God.
This movie took a hard left for me, and I was like, what's happening? Are they all dead? No one cares? Okay, great.
A sword comes out at one point.
I also love that she was too small to hold it. It just fell backwards. So that was classic. I was like, that's correct. That is the correct way this would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
So some realistic thing.
Yeah, Isabel and Brittany in like their cheerleader uniforms, like beating up. Like it was, it was very like Buffy the Vampire Slayer type.
Yes,
like
it really was.
And again, this is what I say where I think like this film so brilliantly like satirizes a lot of tropes from high school movies. I think just taking that whole like the seriousness of the like, this is the rival football team, we have the big game that's coming up plotline that is in so many movies, and being like, well, what if it literally was life or death? What if it literally ended with like a action movie type battle? I love it. I thought that was great. So yeah. The end. And then of course, really quick, because then they show the title and then there's a quick like short scene. Earlier on in the film, there's a quick like cutaway where I think it's like Jeff like throws something and it hits this like really goth like emo kid in the back of the head. He goes, "That's it." And then he writes, "I'm bombing the school." Cut away. They don't go back to it. And then at the end of the movie, after the bomb goes off, they cut to him and he goes, "Damn it, that was supposed to be my thing." And again, I think like this is one of those things where I'm like, there's so many different reactions to like, look, okay. So I was in like 8th grade when the like Newtown shooting happened. I had just graduated high school when Parkland happened. I was in high school like during where this was like the kind of, I do not think there was a day I went to school and I was not thinking about like how would I get out of here if I needed to. And that was just something that was so normalized. And I just kind of had to accept that was part of my life. And like I have told this to people in my life that are like a generation or a couple generations older that are all like, "Oh my God, that's horrifying." And I'm kind of like, I don't know, that was just sort of like part of life. And like when I was a senior, we had an attempted school shooting at my high school. There was a year after I left, there was another attempt. And like, luckily, nobody died, nobody was hurt. But it was just something that was so prevalent in my mind when I was in high school. And I think like there was something very refreshing about like being able to have a joke about it in this movie and being able to like almost sort of talk about the fact that it is such a like insane thing to just have in the background this whole time. So yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. I get that there's other people that maybe could have seen that and been like, oh, that was like a poorly carried out joke or whatever. But that was my thought.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a take that at this point, what else can you do when no one else takes it seriously? And literally the government doesn't take it seriously, the politicians, and these issues have occurred like ever since Columbine, which was my age. Like it just has increased tenfold, if not more. And the fact that nothing's being done, what else can you do? Like, it's just like at this point, y'all have made it, y'all being the authority and protectors of what should be of the future, have done shit. So we'll just, I guess, joke about it because there's nothing much other than crying.
For real. And I mean, like I've seen TV shows take a route of trying to do a serious plot line about school violence, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think, I don't know, like I literally like last year, I remember like my roommate was watching some like old CW show that had been on when we were in high school, and like they had a plot line about school shootings, and I just remember being like I don't want to watch this. Like I don't like it. It's like I was like literally going through and pointing out things that I was like, actually they would do this way, or like this is what they do. Like they would be on the announcements already, like yelling at people, like I don't know. And I was like, that's so like weird and surreal and dystopian that I'm watching this and being like, they're dealing with the school shooting wrong. Like,
right. Was it Seventh Heaven?
It wasn't Seventh. It was.
Were you watching Seventh Heaven last year?
No, but I remember they had a plot, and it made a lot of news.
Oh, it was the Fosters. Yeah, that was before my time. But Seventh Heaven, but I know like Glee also did a plot line where they did a school shooting for some reason. Like I don't know.
Jeez.
But or something. There was a gun. Like they did it like modified, but there was nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And also so on the kind of route of the violence of this film. So there was in an interview and that whole ending scene and how like the ridiculousness of the whole fight scene. For an interview in LA Times, Siegelman said about this movie and about some of the movies that like she had wanted to see as a teenager. Looking back, I would have loved to have seen more queer female characters. But I also would have loved to have seen girls beating each other up and fighting to save the day. And I love movies like Scott Pilgrim and Kick-Ass and Attack the Block, movies where a bunch of boys are getting together to be rambunctious and fight and do stuff. And so this is an accumulation of a lot of different movies with young teen female characters I wish I could have seen. And I think that last scene really reminded me a lot of like Scott Pilgrim and like a lot of these other sort of like comedy movies where there can be that level of violence and it's sort of like satirized in a way where it's like, we're not really gonna, like the violence isn't the issue. The violence is more a way to like tell this plot line.
Right.
And yeah, that was fun. Again, like it was cool seeing like the cheerleaders like beating people up and they're in these like really dramatic, like almost like superhero movie, like kind of poses and stuff.
Again, I told you at the beginning, I told Anney, I was like, this is the more satirical, funny sketch version of Heathers, which was a dark comedy of what it was. And it was essentially similar conversations without the actual queer characters, although it was queer coded.
Definitely.
Which I made Anney watch when I first met her, by the way.
Oh my God. Wait. Okay. I remember showing this from a movie to a friend and their response was, oh, okay. So this reminds me a lot of like how like Heathers was in conversation with like Pretty.
Any of the Brat Pack, 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink.
Right. Which I will say, like the high school movies that I grew up watching was a lot of the like John Hughes movies. And those never spoke to me. I never really liked those movies. And that was like a lot of the same reasons why, like, I think I have my own criticism of like Love, Simon and Heartstopper and a lot of these movies that provide a very like idealized version of high school. And so the way that Heathers is kind of in conversation with those movies is very similar to like, I think what Bottoms is doing to the sort of contemporary trend of high school movies. I also do, I love Heathers. I think it's the same thing where it's like it's a fun movie and yeah, it's ridiculous, but yeah, this is definitely like the more funny, lighthearted version of that. And then so the other part, I think, which I brought up earlier, comparing this to other kind of queer movies about queer people in high school that have come out around the same time. Something that I really liked about this movie was it didn't revolve around the characters coming out or coming to terms with their identity. They were already, like, when they're introduced in the movie, they're established to be queer. you could have made this movie about straight people and it would have been essentially the same plot, you know? Like, it definitely, like, the queerness is integral to it. It is important. It is a part of the story, but it's like, it's not a movie about them being gay. It's a movie about being a high schooler, and they also just happen to be gay. Which I felt that was very refreshing, because there's so many movies where, like, the queerness is the big issue that we have to deal with. The queerness wasn't the issue. The issue was, again, like, the ups and downs of dealing with coming to terms with your sexuality in another way in high school. There's a line at the beginning of the movie where Josie says, "The school is such a gay problem." And PJ responds, "People don't hate us because we're gay. People hate us because we're gay, ugly, and untalented." Which, yeah, is part of the bit. Like, nobody doesn't like them because they're gay. They hate them because they're losers. Which, yeah. And then the other big thing I want to talk about is when this movie was marketed and when it was first, like, kind of when it first came out, it was really funny because there was a brief moment where there was some Twitter controversy over the tagline, which is a movie about empowering women, especially the hot ones. And again, to that point, some people, I think, without really looking into what the movie was about or what it was like, again, it's a satire. It is supposed to be making fun of these things. Like, we're very upset about it, and we're sort of like, oh my God, why that's not feminist if it's that. And it's like, that's the point. That's the point. The point is it's making fun of all these other, like, there's a million movies out there that are about guys trying to woo girls that they think are hot. And, like, it's supposed to be making fun of that and making fun of a, like, and kind of like having a messy, horny, like, over the top version of that's for the gays too. And, like, talking about the fact that, like, sexual desire is not something that straight people only experience, and it's not something that men only experience. Like, I found having queer female characters just be so explicit about what they wanted, that was very refreshing. And something that I did think was interesting, like, looking into this movie a bit more, was the director, Emma Seligman, talked about how it was hard to get this movie made because of that, and because of sort of the niche or perceived, like, niche audience is going to have. This ended up kind of being like a hit, because I do think, yeah, like, there's elements about it that are universal. But according to Deadline, the film was taken up by producer Alison Small and landed at Orion after numerous rejections. Seligman talked about how, like, it was really hard to get this movie made because a lot of studios turned it down. And then also in another article about the film in /Film, quote, Siegelman also said that securing product placement was essentially a non-starter, including those so-called progressive corporations, because they were all too offended by the content of the film. Seligman hasn't outed any of these gutless worms, my words, not hers. But she did say, quote, just think of any liberal corporation that has a pride float. They were all like, no, not only will we not do something with you, but do not put anything of ours in there. It was really disheartening. And I think as we're having this larger conversation about how corporations use pride and use queer aesthetics sometimes as, like, marketing things, when it can be, you know, nice and respectable and not cause any controversy, and then are so quick to pull back as soon as there is any backlash from the right, or as soon as anything is, like, a little bit more outside of, you know, the kind of heteronormative expectations that these things still have to fall into, or, like, toes the line, like, a little bit more than they want. They're so quick to just, like, turn their backs. I think this is another example of, like, yeah, there was this very, like, queer film that has really spoken to a lot of people. The fact that there weren't really any companies that wanted to be involved with it, I think that's saying something. And so then the last big thing I wanted to talk about was, like, the casting of this movie, because I think that was very intentional, and this is another thing that I think I really loved about this movie. So this is a quote from Femme magazine, which is a UCLA publication. Quote, the integrity of the casting makes, quote, the nerd and the cheerleader take new shape, pushing them beyond the stereotypes and nostalgic punchlines. When looking to cast the character of Hazel, played by the ever-charming Ruby Cruz, the casting team was surprised by the new colors Cruz brought to the text. This character was a nerd who was also secretly very cool. The role suddenly contained a mix of self-confidence and the desire to be part of something larger. In an interview with IndieWire, Seligman reflects that when you are inserting queer characters into these tropes from the teen movie genre, they will come out differently. They can't just copy what has been done. That happened naturally with Hazel. So like, and that, I think that is something that I've seen a lot of people's reaction to this movie being like, well, it didn't make any sense that Hazel was kind of like the nerd or like the loser character because like she's so cool and she's so like beautiful. And it's like, that's kind of part of the point is like, it's playing with these tropes. It's like you're casting a like, which yeah, like Ruby Cruz, gorgeous, so much like charm and like I just like such an cool like literally I think I don't know again I didn't watch Willow, so Anney, maybe you could speak to this, but it seemed like her character was sort of like very like badass and charming and like I was like okay cool, like I like that, like we're taking that kind of character. And yeah, when you are queer in high school, like oftentimes you still sort of are the outcast, like regardless of how like cool and chill you are or whatever. Another thing that I've seen talked about in this film was kind of how it deals with the whole like Black best friend trope that we see in a lot of like high school movies, and particularly a lot of like high school movies from like the 90s and early 2000s. When like we're first introduced to Josie and PJ, it kind of seems like, again, like Josie sort of falls into that trope of being like the Black best friend, like sidekick character. When they first see the graffiti on the lockers, Josie's number one and PJ's number two. And PJ has a line where she's like, you're the sidekick, not me. And like, even though at the start of the film, again, like PJ is kind of the one initiating a lot of the plot of the movie, Josie's the one that we see ultimately grow as a character. And like through that kind of ends up being the main character. I found this Medium article about the film, which was written by Alia Bernal-Mormont, in which she states, quote, subverting the comedy genre, the white best friend, PJ, is doomed to fail while the Black protagonist perseveres in all her glory. I've seen the same kind of argument about Tim, who's also kind of introduced as like Jeff's sidekick. But then ultimately, like through the course of the movie, Jeff is like a complete airhead, has no idea what's happening the entire time. Tim is really the main villain. So something I think that was really cool that this movie did is again, like taking... It is entirely like a movie about tropes, right? And it's with Hazel, with Josie, with PJ, with Tim. It subverts a lot of these tropes on their head and like sees the ways that we can reimagine them in a queer context. And I really love that. That gives me a lot of hope for like the future of these types of films and the future of like queer reimaginings of these genres.
Yes. It's really fun. It's fun to like reimagine tropes or see them done differently.
Yeah.
It's refreshing. I like it too.
I want to end on a quote that's also from that Femme magazine article that says, quote, whether it's a cult classic or not, Bottoms is more than just nostalgic for the wild time of 2023. It's emblematic and, dare I say, optimistic for a new generation's vision of filmmaking. The film's disregard for social and cinematic etiquette perfectly encapsulates frustration of today's youth, presenting a story that is as joyous as it is delightfully uncomfortable. And then I think gets at kind of my main takeaway from this. It is such a ridiculous movie. It is like so much happens. There's so many. It's so irreverent. It is so its own unique thing. And I love that. And that is what I hope we really see more of, I think, going forward with queer film and like just film in general. So, yeah.
I mean, it's definitely one of those like very smart, fast talking, off pace. Like it keeps you going in one way or the other, whether you get comfortable or not. It jumps to another thing. You're like, what? Oh, what? Like
oh, yeah.
Car bombing was out of nowhere. Like they were exiting the house and you're like, the end. Oh, she's going to bomb the car. Okay, that's one. And then like
there's so many lines.
Football game.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna kill somebody. And they're like, they're literally they're gonna kill an entire football team. No one seems to care. Cool. Okay, we're good. We got that. And then everybody makes out even better. Let's go. Like it definitely hit up all of that with all of like, again, with like the good one-liners, whether it was AO or Marshall Lynch or like Hazel character. Like they did each line that was so specific to that character and or to the plot. Like you were like, where did that come from? That it's a smart comedy that actually has been like, oh, maybe I'm too old for this because what's happening? Like half of that was for me as well, but it was so good. It's like, yeah, look, this is reminiscent of the times of like, whether it was Heathers in the 80s or 10 Things I Hate About You in the late 90s. It's like, it kind of hits into that, remember, like the younger generation, whatever it was at that time, are smarter than you think. And here's like, this is what's entertaining them. And yeah, if you don't understand, you don't understand. Like, end of story. It has like that level that is like, yes, okay. I love it. Let's keep making these like hilarious levels of commentary that also takes a while to figure out.
Yeah.
For me.
One of the things I remember, one of the articles I was reading about this movie was talking about the fact that something that it does too is that like a lot of movies that focus on teenage girls will kind of have like a like girl power undertone. This movie explicitly is in conversation with feminism and explicitly has a lot of jokes that have to do with having some knowledge of like feminism and feminist history and all of that. And it's like, you know, despite a movie that is about two girls trying to trick other girls into wanting to sleep with them, it is like a very feminist movie in the way that it is very explicit about the fact that it is in conversation with a lot of these like overarching feminist ideas. And like even the joke about like, oh, it's just the second wave all over again. Or there's like another joke about like, oh, my uterus belongs to the government or like something like that. Like there's all these like little quips that it's like you have to kind of have a little bit more of a like it goes beyond the surface level, just like girl boss, like girl power idea. It's like it requires a little bit more of an understanding of like what feminism is and what like the status of women and queer women in the world right now is. And I love that. Yeah.
It's definitely in the background the whole time too. Like there's a lot of posters that's like, smile more, women, he'll like you. And it's very much in that kind of hetero male gaze of this is your part to play. And so it was nice to see characters that just don't care about that. Like, no, that's not my thing. And just a bunch of like conversations around like the teacher with allies and that, and like really bad flirting in the beginning with the being thin. Oof. Oh my gosh. So that was there. And then, like there's this whole scene where they're like trauma dumping. And it's pretty like, oof. Oh my gosh. So yeah, in that way, it is consistent throughout in a way that's both funny and kind of like, yep.
Yeah. It makes you think. And again, I think like I've also like talked to people that were like, well, I didn't really like it because I don't like how casually they just talked about like sexual assault and stuff like that. And I was like, I get that. That's understandable. Like I think again, like everybody has different responses to things. And I think that's an understandable response. I watched it and my response was like, wow, this is really cathartic to be able to like joke about this in a way that is not exploitative, you know? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's definitely a movie that like is consistently like commenting on, again, like a lot of this stuff that was very present in my life when I was in high school and navigating high school as like a queer teenager. And yeah, I think the movie does a good job of discussing a lot of that in like a very satirical, over the top way.
Yes, I agree. We should come back later and just talk about our high school experiences, because I did have moments watching this where I was like, is that what it's like now? Or is this satire?
Yes to both, I will say.
I feel like it's throwing it back because the cheerleader, like the captain of the team and the high school cheerleader thing, I thought was so 90s that I was like, oh, is it back? Is that back now? Because for a minute, you know, how it did the whole, what was that show? Jonah Hill, when it's like, it's not cool to be an athlete anymore. It's cool to be the nerd. And that was like mid 2000s. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's about right. Like, have we gone back to being the jock is the better way? I'm like, huh.
I don't know. I will say, I mean, like, I don't know. And again, like everybody's high school is different. I went to a huge high school too. So it was very like, I don't know, we didn't have as much as like the social structure, I think, just because everybody was kind of doing their own thing. But like, that's another thing where I think like this movie does a good job of like satirizing those films, because like I grew up watching a lot of the like John Hughes movies and a lot of like, like the early 2000s movies that were very much like, the popular kids are the cheerleaders and the football players. And like, I think I knew the names of like 2 cheerleaders like by high school. Like it was just kind of like, oh, that's like another activity people do. Like, I don't know. It wasn't like I was sort of like, oh, this isn't what I was told high school was going to be like. And I feel like this movie does like also kind of makes fun of that. Like, this is the image that we have in the movies of what high school is like.
Yeah, what high school is
I mean,
I knew some gay cheerleaders. Like, they were cool. I don't know.
I will tell you, I related with the football is everything. That in my town, that was everything.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen The Faculty?
No.
It's like from 1999.
The 90s.
Yeah.
It's a horror film, kind of.
Oh, okay. Nice. My senior year of high school, our football team lost every single game, which was really funny. So we were not a football high school.
We weren't either. Like, a small town. We were a small town in the South. We were not a high school football team, like football town either, because we sucked. So no one really cared. Like, you cared because you did things. That was the only thing to do. And most of the people in the town was involved. Outside of that, the band did so much more. The band actually ruled our school more than any other group.
Band was like, also a big
won,
thing.
Like homecoming queen and all of that, because that was that level. They were a force.
I was in band. My experience was different, but I believe a homecoming queen was from band. She was pretty good, though. I actually liked her. I say that as if there were like factions.
I mean, there were, but not this level. Anyway, high school experience aside.
Yeah,
I was both.
I don't know. I was a theater kid.
Theater kids.
Yeah. I was a cheerleader in a theater.
The theater. You were a cheerleader? Oh my God.
I don't know. Should I be offended by that?
Like, that weirdly makes sense. This is the thing though. No, because like I know that is. I was gonna say, like, I feel like I know. This is going back to the whole like cheerleader trope and where I was like, so many of the people that I knew that used to be cheerleaders like were not like, then grew up and were not like the preppy, like, I don't know. Yeah, like it's
well, this is why we have to examine the tropes.
So we have to examine the tropes. I was a dancer for a really long time too, so I feel like there's an alternate universe where maybe that was me.
I love the conversation. But we're all from different like eras too. We are all from different eras.
Well, clearly, yes, we should come back and talk about this because it was a really fun movie. I'm glad you turned us onto it. I hadn't heard of it, and I really enjoyed it.
You hadn't heard of it?
And I did make me think about a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I never heard of it.
Really?
So thank you.
I remember it was a big deal when it came out. Maybe it was just in my world.
Behind the times.
And he's not on TikTok.
Some very specific ways I am behind the times, and other ways I'm like way ahead. It's bizarre.
Right.
But yes, I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for coming on and talking about it and sharing this with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me just talk about this movie. So glad you guys liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. We always enjoy having you on. So come back whenever.
I'll be back soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So where can the good listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Pat Not Pratt. That's PATTNOTPRATT. I would also encourage y'all to follow the iHeart Union social medias. You can find that at iHeart Pod Union, iHeart, and then Pod Union, all one word. That's the Instagram and Twitter and all of that. But yeah, I would recommend, if you like this show, if you like listening to other iHeart podcasts, you want to support the people that are making those podcasts, check us out. Check out the work we're doing.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Well, until next time, Joey, that was so fun. Listeners, if you would like to contact us, you can. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store, YouTube page, and a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and contributor, Joey.
Yay! Thank you.
Yes. And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I'll Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.